Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new and haven't seen any of my videos before, hi, my name is Rachel Lost. Now, it's been a minute since I've made a video about houseplants, and if you follow me on Instagram, or perhaps you've seen in my videos, I do really like them. I often get comments from you guys saying that you're always killing your houseplants and they're just not staying alive and all that sort of thing, so I thought I would share my tips with you of how to choose the right plants for the space that you have. It doesn't matter what area of the house you are putting the plants in, the same rules apply for everywhere. Before I jump into it, please give this video a thumbs up for me. If you're new, hit the subscribe button and let's get started. First up, you want to observe the space that you're looking to be putting a plant in. So is it somewhere wide and open, or is it somewhere small like a shelf? I feel like this is a very obvious one, but the space that you have available is going to really dictate what kind of plant can go in that area. Some plants are going to grow really big, and by that I mean some might be tall, but others might be wide. So it's really going to depend how much space you've got, what sort of area you're putting the plant in, as to what you might want to go for. So that's the first step. So instead of going straight to a plant nursery or something like that and just picking a plant based on what you think looks good, look at the space that you have available first. So many people just go and look for plants and pick a plant purely for aesthetic reasons rather than figuring out what's going to work in the space well, and that's why your plants die a lot of the time. Once you've picked the space that you want to be putting a plant in, you need to observe what kind of light hits that area. Is it nice, soft, gentle light all throughout the day, or does it have harsh sunlight partially throughout the day and then it's in shade the rest of the day? You just need to observe that space, look at it a couple of times a day, and just figure out how the light is looking. Different plants obviously have different light needs. Some love shade, some love being in direct sunlight, and others can have a little bit of a mix of both. Some plants that are great in shadier areas are things like devil's ivy, cast iron plants, also bamboo, peace lily, and ferns. Some plants that are only going to want to be in really light and bright areas include other things like palms, and also things like succulents and figs. Of course, when you are shopping for the plant, make sure you're reading the tag and checking what their light needs are if you're not already aware of it. The next thing is humidity. What area are you putting them in? Is it a drier area like a bedroom, or is it a warmer, hotter area like a bathroom or a kitchen? Some plants can thrive in these sort of humid areas, especially in the bathroom where there is a lot of like water vapors in the air and everything, and other plants don't do so well. So just ask yourself, is this environment humid or not? Pretty easy question. If you've already bought containers and pots for your plant, you need to make sure they're suitable for whatever you're going to be putting in there. When it comes to indoor plants, some of the ones that I like are pots that have a built-in system at the bottom where it's got a little drain area and then it's got storage for extra water. So that way, if you overwater, the water's going to run into that little runoff area down the bottom. It also means that you're not wasting extra water. You definitely don't want to choose any pots that don't have any holes underneath. I know sometimes when I've been to hardware stores and things like that and I'm looking for pots, they don't have any holes in the bottom, so they'd have to be drilled in, or you'd have to put a smaller pot inside that bigger pot. The reason that you want this drainage is because you don't want the plant to get root rot. Once a plant has root rot, its leaves are going to start to drop off usually. Also consider the size of the pot as well if you have already bought the pots before you go and buy the plants. A smaller, shallow pot can work well for things like succulents and cacti because they need quite shallow soil a lot of the time. But if you're purchasing something which you want to grow quite tall, it needs to not only be fairly wide, but it needs to be quite deep as well for the plant's root system. So something like that would be a tall fiddle leaf fig, or I have a grevillea which needed quite a deep pot as well. From a more design point of view, you may want to also consider the decor that you have in your apartment or your house before you add the plants to it. Super modern, minimalist, and sleek places can look really awesome when you incorporate things like cacti and succulents. The reason for this is because these plants are usually smaller, or they have a lot of hard lines to them, which keeps that modern theme to the space. If you're wanting something to feel more comfortable and more homey, you may want to look at plants that are more like ferns and have those like softer leaves and appearance to them. But this one is totally up to your personal choice and how you like to decorate your space. Next, you also need to consider how much effort you really have time to put into these plants. The reason that I love things like pothos or palms is because they're very easy to look after, especially if I go away and I have someone looking after my house and my dogs. I know that they can just water the plants and they're bound to be all right. Cacti and any succulent type plants such as Indian rope plant are also really good for this as well because they require a minimal amount of watering. You'll probably also also want to consider how often a plant needs to be fertilized and if it needs anything really special, or if you can just use an all-purpose fertilizer mix. So if you've got your space, you know the light, you've researched a couple of plants that will do well in that light, make sure that you check how often they need to be fertilized. Some plants need to be fertilized every fortnight, and then some plants you might need to only fertilize maybe once a month or even a little bit less. So really consider how much time you're able to give to these plants and their maintenance. The final thing that I'm going to mention today about how to pick the right plants for your space is whether you have kids or pets. I'm not going to sit here and list them off all individually because it would just take far too long, but definitely look to see if a plant is toxic or not to your pets and your kids. Some plants that are toxic to cats aren't toxic to dogs, and it just depends on how you're going to set them up as well. I've trained Ducky not to go near any of the plants at all. She really couldn't care any less about them. I'm still training Luca because he is a fair bit younger. He's only like 6 months old at the moment. So any plant that is bad for him or perhaps not good, like if it's bordering on that line, is way out of reach. I also don't have any fiddle leaf figs at the moment. I absolutely love fiddle leaf figs, but if one of the leaves drops and then he was to eat it, I know it probably wouldn't be too good for him. So I did the same thing when Ducky was a puppy. I didn't have any fiddle leaf figs in the house. I still have things like pothos hanging up way out of the way. I trim the bottom of them as well so that they don't come near the ground and the dogs can't reach them. I've never had leaves on a pothos drop off at all, but that's definitely something that you want to look into and make sure the plant isn't toxic to whoever else is living in your home. I hope you found some of these guidelines useful and you're able to keep your plants alive for longer. I'd love to hear in a comment below as well what your favorite kind of houseplant is. Mine at the moment is definitely probably devil's ivy / pothos, because just recently I've gotten into growing them in water, and so that made me really excited. Like the fact that they don't have to grow in soil, you can keep them in water as well, so I think they look really cool. They're also super resistant and they just don't die. So yes, leave me a comment below and let me know what your favorite kind of houseplant is. If you're new, please hit subscribe because I do upload twice a week. I'll catch you guys all in my next upload. Bye!